Welcome to 44 on 1 with GVizzle and Tempest. Like and subscribe, and here we go.
Anyway, yeah, so I got a clip today to play people, and I had mixed feelings about it when I sent it to you offline. And I'm not too sure about it. I think overall it sends a harmful message. So anyway, I'll play the clip, see what you guys think, and then we'll chinwag about it afterwards.
When men are like, well, what do I get in return for paying for dinner? Baby boy, you get to be in her presence. If you want things, go date a man. You need to be dating a man. The problem with a lot of straight guys is they don't like women. I'm not attracted to women, but I think I like women more than a lot of these guys. There have been wars fought over women. There's countries where a man can't even be in the same room with a woman who he isn't related to. That's how powerful and strong and desirable and valuable femininity and womanhood is. And men in the West are like, well, what am I getting in return for holding the door open for you? You get to be around her. You do things for her to convince her that you're a protector, a provider, you're safe, and she spends time with you, and in return, you get to be around her. You want a provider? Date men. I can give you a lot of advice on that if you need that. You shouldn't be dating women. If you want things in return, if simply being around her isn't enough for you, you're dating the wrong woman or the wrong gender. That's it. This is ridiculous.
I like his intent.
Yeah.
But the delivery, he had really good intentions.
I was wondering if he was trying so hard to be, I hate the term, but to be a good ally, and he was trying so hard to be funny, he forgot to actually make sense.
Well, I think, but it's the challenge is that there's a lot of people who think that exact same way. There are a lot of people who have that exact same mentality. So I don't think that he was not trying to make a point. I think he made the point he set out to make, but it was the wrong point to have been made.
Sure.
Because it should, anybody who asks anybody else what they bring to the table, in my opinion, is already problematic. Because I'm not going to tell you what you're going to find valuable about me, because that's not how it works. Spend time with me, figure it out. If I've got to sell myself like a job interview, I'm not going to waste my time. Because what I think, maybe if I were to say to you, oh, I'm a really great cook, I love pets, and I want to have a dozen children, and you're like, okay, I'm not a foodie. I'm allergic to dogs and I don't like kids. So that whole conversation is ridiculous. But the way he was talking was very much putting women on a pedestal, and that's not where women should be. Oh, you get to be in her presence. Wars have been fought. No. If we're fighting for an even playing field, then there's not women. You don't get to bask in the glow of their feminine energy.
No one's that awesome. And
no,
if you
stop fetishizing and pedestalizing women.
Yeah, if one of you is worshipping the other one, like basking in their presence and worshipping the ground they walk on, that's an unhealthy relationship.
Absolutely. And he says, if you want things, you date a man. But that's also not an even exchange either, because you're not dating somebody to get things. When he's talking about the provider and the protector, women have ad nauseum said, we can provide for ourselves. And who do we need protection from? Just don't be a menace. And we need protection.
Anyway, I thought that's really contradictory of him as well, to say in one breath to say, men don't be this way. And the next breath saying, oh, but if you want that, date a man. And so hang on, are we supposed to not be like that and to be something else? Or should we just give into it and be gay?
But also, like, the whole being gay thing. So has a gay guy never said to another gay guy, what do you bring to the table? Is there not that same dynamic? Are they both being providers and protectors? Because how does that dynamic work?
Yeah.
But it just, and men are allowed in some cultures, men are allowed in the same room as a woman. That's not because...
That's not because women are powerful.
That's not for good reasons. It's because to keep women safe from those men.
It's either because they want to control the women, or they know how dangerous men are, or it's for religious reasons, or it could just be because they're on their periods and they have taboo around that in their culture. And it's another way of oppressing women. So, yeah, I don't think it was very well thought through. And then what depresses me is that's got 4.5 million views.
I know. And there's probably going to be a lot of women in the comments who were like, yeah, but they shouldn't be. What they should be saying is, no.
Yeah.
Reel it back. If someone says to you, what do you bring to the table? Just end the relationship or end the date right there, because it's not going to go anywhere. You don't need to try to sell yourself. You don't need to be like, oh, you get me. Who? You get this.
So?
bundle of neuroses and mental health issues. Like, what?
Yeah.
Who?
Yeah.
Nobody can answer that question with like
No.
wars have been fought over women like me. No.
No. No, because nobody thought that was a good idea at the time. The men fighting in those battles thought it was a bag of shit that they had to go fight over a woman they wouldn't ever get the chance to meet.
Exactly. If we're going to strive for equality and equity, then what do you bring to the table? You know what? I'll bring my half of this meal. Is if you want me to go Dutch on this date, then let's just do that and stop with the stupid questions.
Yeah, exactly. And then
because that's really what it comes down to. Like, men are trying to get women to, what do you bring to? I'm paying for this meal. What do you bring to the table? Bitch, where did you take me that you can't afford a $30 meal? Like, if you can't afford to date without trying to get somebody to explain to you what you're going to get for this $30 fucking pasta dish, then don't date.
Yeah. Because I think the guys that are asking those questions too, they've completely overthought the whole thing. That they've overanalyzed it to an insane degree, and then they've got this almost like fatalistic, reductionist idea of what dating is. They're going like, okay, at the most basic level, I take her out. If I show her a good time, if I look presentable, and if I wash myself and I'm well groomed, chances are she'll touch it, right? What do I need to do to raise the chances of her touching it? And, and that's how they've thought about it.
Is that the same? Like, a lot of the men who ask, what do you bring to the table? Also they're not bringing anything except that one meal. Like, it's not like they are coming from generational wealth or they have built themselves up. Like, because any woman that they go out with, they all talk about women being gold diggers. Meanwhile, they don't have any gold to be dug.
Yeah.
But they also are looking at relationships very transactionally. I'm giving you this meal. What are you giving me in return? Which that's really not how it works. But also, those same type of men are the ones who are all over different subreddits and all over other social media to say, well, women are the gatekeepers of sex and relationships and blah, blah. So if you're going to put us in the position of being the gatekeeper, then you can't complain when that same woman you've told is the gatekeeper is asking you for a toll to open the gate. Like, it's the whole thing is a fucking shit show. The whole thing is a shit show.
I see that the root cause of it, I think, is the root problem here that people are dealing with is dating itself. This whole concept of dating is flawed. I hate that.
People don't want to take the time to get to know somebody, so they turn it into a job interview. I'm going to give you, we're going to go out for a meal. You're going to tell me what you bring to the table. I will tell you what you bring to the table. And if it's a match, that's not how it's supposed to work.
That's not how chemistry's made. It's
supposed to be organic. You're supposed to get to know each other. I think that's the problem with the cold approach. A lot of guys talk about the cold approach. This is why you don't cold approach, because then your first date is sitting across from someone being like, who are you as a person? Because I know nothing about you except that I was attracted to you initially.
Yeah. And it's, I just thought you were a bit fit, so I thought I'd take you out for dinner, see if you'll touch it. Like, that's... Yeah.
Obviously, if I think you're attractive, it's going to be a whirlwind romance that we're fall in love like a Disney movie.
And it's all the wrong things that you're activating in your brain. Like, all of those chemicals that start activating that make you feel all the way that you do, you end up associating that with love when it's just lust. It's just chemical lust. And you're not actually developing a bond with somebody.
And a lot of what I've noticed in a lot of interactions that I've seen where men, because I troll a lot of subreddits, where men are like having the whole "what do you bring to the table" conversation, regardless of what a woman says, is not enough for them. Like, if women in those comments are like, well, I make my own money, so you don't need to support me, I all that, they're like, yeah, but what else? And so what else do you want? Like, what are you looking for? Tell me what you're looking for, and I will tell you if I can fulfill that. Instead of me being like, well, you like this? What do you about this? You like this?
Yeah.
What do you want me to do for you? It's like people who's got their Tinder profiles are all about what I'm looking for instead of this is who I am. This is what I'm offering. Let's see if it gels.
Exactly. And then the whole thing with the dating, like, you set up your Tinder profile. This is what I'm looking for, but you've not really thought about what you actually are. Like, you haven't formed your own identity. You're basing whether a relationship will work is if people will fulfill the criteria that you've set out, and you haven't really thought it through. Like, you're just thinking, okay, I think these are part of my identity and I want you to fill those criteria. But then you're going to activate buyer's remorse. Everybody gets this. If you select the thing that you want, but then you can get rid of it, you're going to get rid of it. And you're going to want the next thing instead. Okay, I'll go out dating and I'll try another product. And that's what you're doing. You're just trying on these partners like you would a pair of clothes. And that's because you haven't put the work in to find out who somebody is for yourself and actually form that that bond on a personal level. I mean,
it makes sense, because if you're coming at it with you're asking that type of question, it's not because you want to take that time to form that bond.
Yeah. You just want to get your end away and that's it. I mean, the thing is, like, if you look at how you met your husband and how I met my partner, like, people don't meet like that anymore. Like, you met your husband one day in a pub, didn't you? Like he was a friend of a friend.
A friend of mine picked up a friend of his, and then in hanging out, we got together.
Me and my partner, we're in the like, it was the university we were at was collegiate, so it had all these different colleges, and we're in the one for postgrads. And I was just standing in the coffee queue, and I'd seen her around, so like I knew she was like working, doing a PhD and stuff. Anyway, she went to leave the coffee queue and walked into me, and it was like she was really middle class about it. She's like, "Oh, sorry," and then I thought it was endearing. So then she went and sat down, and then that gave me an excuse to go talk to her later, and then it broke the ice. So I was
That
like,
sounds like the beginning of a Hallmark movie,
doesn't it? Yeah. And then 3 years later we got together properly. So because
I think people are in such a rush. They don't want to waste any time. So they feel like, I'm going to ask these questions without even being able to answer it for themselves. Like, I would never ask somebody, what do you bring to the table? Because if they ask me in return, I'd be like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, if you can't answer that question, you shouldn't be asking that question. And if you have to ask that question, it's because you haven't taken the time to get to know that person. And when men are asked, they all come back with the same, we're protectors, we're providers. It's like, you make minimum wage. Who you provide? You can barely provide for yourself. Who are you providing for? Who are you protecting against? It's not like there's dangers everywhere, that there's this constant need for protection. And then this is another trend that I see. Who does all the heavy lifting and all the heavy jobs? And women couldn't survive without men, because who's going to build the roads and build the houses? They've kind of glommed on to these men of the past.
Yes.
Like, men are warriors. And when was the last time you slayed a wild boar with your bare hands?
Yeah, exactly. You look at, I guarantee you go back in time and then you go speak to those men there, and then you say to them, I don't have to do those things anymore because you did it and you died and you broke your back doing it for me. So that, I don't need to do that now. They would be pleased for you.
Isn't that the point?
Yeah, that's why we did it. And when I was younger, like before, like, back in the 90s and that, you still had all these Charlotte and snake oil salesmen, but they weren't as big as they are now. And I just remember talking to my mates' dads and stuff, and then they'd say like, yeah, no, the reason why I work so much is so my kid doesn't have to. I want to send him to a good school.
Exactly. And that's why everybody who fought for a reason. It's for the future generations. If your kids don't have it better than you did, then you have failed your kids, as far as I'm concerned, because isn't that the point? To pave the way so that they don't have to go through this. They'll have their own brand new struggles, but they won't have the same struggles that you had, which is kind of what pisses me off a lot when I've worked with women over the years who have that, like, fuck you, I worked hard, you got to work hard attitude, instead of, I paved the way. My struggles pave the way for you. But people get so bent up on, if I can't have it, you can't.
Yeah.
Like in the US with a lot of that student loan forgiveness, we were like, that's bullshit. I had to pay for my student loans. Well, you also, I mean, if you want to go back even further, 100 years before that, you also didn't have as high a chance of dying in childbirth, and you weren't going to get slaughtered by a woolly mammoth. So, like, should we go all the way back? Like, the point is to make things easier. But are we at a point where it's almost like a whole other conversation, too easy, where people don't even try anymore because they don't feel like they need to?
Yeah. And then they create their own problems then, because there's no adversity. So they create their own issues and their own drama.
My husband told me about the study that he had read. I'll probably butcher the details of it, but it was these mice, this colony of mice, or whatever you call them. And they removed all challenge for the mice. So they
Yeah.
gave them all the food, they gave them the shelter, they gave them everything they needed. So the mice didn't have to work to get that stuff. And I think within a couple of generations of mice, they all died out because
Yeah.
they didn't have that work. And it was the same. I don't know if you ever watched the show The Good Place, but when they got to the good place, everybody
Yeah.
was just depressed because there was nothing else.
Happened.
There was nothing to work for. So when they had that, like, oh, there is something at the end, then it kind of lit a fire under their asses.
Yeah, this is one of my main arguments against something like socialism or communism, is because they remove the ability for humans to think for themselves, to make their own daily choices, and the freedom of that choice and selection. And then you just end up wanting to cause problems in the society just because there's nothing to do. And like you say, it's been pretty well proven through animal studies, different kinds of studies on humans that show you when we get bored, shit gets bad.
Well, I mean, you can kind of see it in social media when people are like, if I say, oh, this is good coffee, you're like, what about tea? How come you hate tea? What's going on? You're racist. Like, you just, they're constantly looking for that fight because maybe you just don't get it in your day-to-day life. You don't struggle enough in your day-to-day life. You've got to struggle online.
Yeah, totally. And it's online, you can say whatever you want, and nobody can check it. So you can make outlandish claims, you know?
Did you share that video with me about men who had to sit in front of women and read comments from other men about women?
Oh, yeah.
And the men were like, there are men who boldly peck that out on their keyboards, but then when they have to actually say it to a woman, they're like, can't even look at her.
Yeah. So like these are comments that those women had received. Like those guys hadn't written them, but they had to say it to their face as if they were saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you can see somebody, it's a lot harder.
Well, it's like when I used to work in a call center, there were people who had phone balls because they would yell at you over the phone, but then as soon as you got them in person, they were like, hey, good morning, hi, here's my payment. Anonymity creates a lot of rash and terrible attitudes.
There was a study, I can't remember what the percentage was, but there was a lot of men, because I've got a couple of things I need to catch up reading on, and there's been a study done where a crazy high percentage of men admitted that they would sexually assault a woman if they were never going to get caught for it.
That's horrifying.
Yeah.
That's horrifying. I wonder if they've done similar studies with women about like what they would do. Apparently, and I saw this a while ago and I can't find it again. I've been searching the interwebs to find it, but it was after no fault divorce was implemented or when it became legal. And I made so there was like a 30% drop in domestic violence. There was a significant drop in female suicide, but I think there was also a drop in like men being murdered by their wives. Because if women couldn't divorce men, like there's been a lot of women who on their deathbeds in the throes of dementia are like, I killed my husband 50 years ago because they had no way out. So they would just slowly start poisoning their husbands to get out of these marriages.
Yeah, women can be quite crafty when they have to be. And it's amazing what people under pressure will do, how patient they can be about it.
If you know there's a way out, it's that light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, we had a case here, right? So I don't know if it's made it to Canadian news, but our government's in big trouble at the moment because there was I think they had 900 people originally prosecuted who worked at the post office. So they were postmasters at our post offices, and it was for fraud. So they said that these people like embezzling thousands of pounds and all this stuff. People killed themselves, people got divorced, lost families, lost entire livelihoods over it. And it turned out that the fraud was actually because of a software error that the post office were denying existed. And it's got big ties to really senior government officials and stuff. There's a huge cover-up.
Holy shit.
And only 98 people got acquitted. Yeah. And it's been going on for 20 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So they're finally, documentaries come out and they're finally getting the recognition and that. But like people killed themselves over this. But anyway, the story is there's this one guy, he was sent to prison about 15 years ago. And he's trying to claim now because he went to prison for murdering his wife, and it was really dodgy what happened. I'll go into that in a minute. But he's trying to use the this postmaster's fraud thing to try and raise awareness about his case, which is really, yeah, it's really weird. So what they were doing apparently is that whenever the error came up, if they were over or under, so if their books were under, they would use their savings to balance the books. And then if the books were over, then they take the money out and put it back in their savings. And then it looked like, which is fraud, and it looked like the books were balanced the whole time, so they skirted underneath the issue. But apparently he they had trouble like proving that it was him that did it, I think. But his wife was bludgeoned to death in her own bed, and he was claiming that he was working in the post shop downstairs because they stayed in the apartment above it. And he went downstairs to start work about 4:30 in the morning. And in between then and 8:30, she was bludgeoned to death. And then he had no idea what happened.
Yeah, but if he lived and worked in the same building, it's not a stretch of the imagination that he just like shut the door for 10 minutes, went upstairs, bludgeoned his wife, and went back to work. That's a terrible alibi. It's not like you were across town and had to drive 3 hours to get back home.
Yeah, and what he was trying to claim is that his post office, because they have like the time lock safe, and it time locked open at 8:30 in the morning, and he called the police at like 8:32 or 8:33 to say that he'd been robbed, and he was trying to make that the alibi for her being bludgeoned to death. And they were like, no, but the autopsy says that she died in the early hours of the morning. And he said, and he changed his story to try and claim, well, maybe the person was already in the shop and they hid in the flat and then waited for me to go downstairs and then bludgeoned her to death.
I mean, this guy just watched 2 episodes of CSI.
Yeah,
and been able to figure out.
Yeah.
Liver temperature gives you the time of death, roughly estimated, whatever.
Yeah, and then the murder weapon was a small crowbar, and it was found on top of a wall near the post house. So I think he tried to put it there to pretend that the person had run away and just chucked it over the wall, but it landed on top of it. And then they found the murder weapon.
What a poorly executed crime.
And then as for motive, it looked like that maybe they were getting a divorce or something. And because a year beforehand, she'd been using like dating apps and stuff that were available at the time. And yeah, and then they'd spoken about it, and then they went to marriage counseling, and supposedly it was all okay. And then a year later, she was bludgeoned to death. I'm thinking, I think he was just biding his fucking time, just trying to leave it just long enough to make it look like it's not linked to it.
Like it, yeah, exactly. Like, I look how happy we've been. I can't believe this would happen. We sorted it all out. Things have never been better. Not me planning this since I learned she was on Tinder.
Yeah, exactly. I suppose in those days, probably plenty of fish would be there.
Oh, yeah. A friend of mine, or an old coworker of mine, used to work at Lava Life. I don't know if you remember that one.
No.
I think it was like one of the very first kind of apps or websites. And so she was in the training department, and she was training the reps who had to either review the posts that people were putting to make sure that they met the Lava Life terms of service, or that they met whatever criteria they had set out. And they didn't have, I guess at the time, they didn't have like an algorithm that would scan out keywords. So people had to actually watch them. So her training would be like, okay, who knows what a golden shower is? They would have to understand the words that they were looking for. So if they saw it, they were like, okay, this is banned. We need to pull this. So she had to like teach them all these crazy, it got much worse than that. That was the one that stands out to me. But she had to teach them all the, like, here's the potential things that you could see. If someone says they want a strawberry shortcake or whatever that means, then you pull
That's hilarious. Oh my God.
I was like, at the time, I was like, are they hiring? Because that sounds like it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Be quite a good laugh. I've got an interesting question, because like we've spoken before about medical misogyny and like how medicine has trouble like catering for women sometimes. And because I saw this case, it was on TikTok, and this woman was talking about how she got to hospital, and it turns out, I think it's like gallstones or something. But then when she was there, they offered her a pap smear and some other like feminine medicine things. And then somebody in the comments like took it badly. She was like, "Oh, of course they fucking did," sort of thing. Like, because she was there on a completely unrelated thing. So, like, I think the commenter kind of took it as that, like, oh well, they're just looking down on you as a woman and offering you stuff you don't even need or something. I didn't understand. My perspective is that.
I mean,
Uh,
I don't see how offering preventative care
yeah,
is a problem.
yeah,
I'm confused by that. Like, if I was already there and they
Mm.
asked, like, when was your last pap smear?
Mm.
Okay, yeah, I'm already here. Let's do it up. Like, let's do all the screenings. In Canada now, I think we're in Ontario anyway. You can only get it every 3 years unless there's a family history or unless there's an issue. And like, when I want it every year, I don't want to wait.
Yeah.
They fucking call ovarian cancer the silent killer for a reason. I don't want to wait 3 years
things
to find
change
out.
quick.
Exactly. So then, like, I try to get it every year, and they're like, "Nah, you gotta wait unless you want to pay for it out of pocket." I was like, "Then here, I'll pay for it out of pocket." Like, if how much does this test cost? So to be offered that and then to think that's a problem, no. Take all the preventative care you can.
Do you think Americans might have a different view at all? Like, if they've got to pay for it, but you can always turn it down, right?
Yeah, I mean, if they offered her a pap smear, she could have said no. It's not like they were. If they were forcing her to do it, then that's a whole other issue. But if she's been offered, like the last time I went to my dentist, they offered me a weird X-ray, but I'd have to pull out all my earrings to do it, and I was like, no, I'm not in the mood for that.
Ding, 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 ding.
Forget it. So yeah, they didn't hold me down to pull my earrings out. I don't think anyone's going to hold her down to shove a speculum in her.
Because the person that made the video, I think she was all right with it. She was just commenting that that's what they did. But I think, but I still put my tuppence in, because I used to work at NHS England, and just said, like, I don't think this is a case of medicine kind of not understanding women. I think it's just that there are a minority of women who like don't look after themselves with these regular tests, and so they just try and catch as many as possible when they come into the system. Like, would you like this? Because I know in the UK there's still a lot of women that miss out on getting them, even though it's
really
technically for free. Yeah, so it's particularly for younger women, like when they get into the age to get these things checked, they kind of leave it a bit too long and stuff. So it's
no, I've been turned away. I made an appointment last year to get one, and they're like, it's only been a year and a half, and I was like,
Jesus.
Yeah, and they're like, you gotta wait. I was like, oh, how much is it? How much is it? I'll pay for it. Yeah, it's, and maybe the American healthcare system would be different because maybe they're not asking. I mean, if it is an American one example, then yeah, that's going to be an invoice she's going to get. Maybe she wasn't prepared to make payment on that invoice, or they're trying to use it as a cash grab. But as a Canadian, hearing that, knowing that I wouldn't have to pay for it, I'd be like, yep, let's do it. Throw a mammogram in there while we're at it.
Yeah.
Give me all the tests.
Yeah, because there was somebody recently, I can't remember who it was. There's a guy, he died of a cancer that has a 96% survival rate.
I saw a story of a guy, I don't know if it was the same guy and how old the story is, but this guy was in his early 30s, super fit. He was having some terrible symptoms, and he just kept like, man up. You don't need to go to the doctor. You're a man. Just be tough. And now he's got terminal cancer because he was, and it doesn't sound like it's the same guy then, but he's now got terminal cancer because he ignored all these symptoms, thinking like, oh, it's just bloating. It's just constipation. It's just back pain. He never thought I should probably get this combination of symptoms checked out, because he had to man up and not go to the doctor.
Man. Yeah. See,
that's such a problem with this whole, I think this is one of the ways that men, when they are like, how does the patriarchy affect men? This is how. This is exactly how, because this guy thought he had to man up, and that if he was tough enough, he could scare the cancer out of his body. Now he's dying because he couldn't just say, I need to go to the doctor. I need to get out there. This is why men have worse health outcomes, because they wait longer or they ignore their symptoms. It's why married men are healthier in general, because their wives are like, go to the fucking doctor.
Well,
they're forcing them to go.
On the Oregon Trail, the people who died the most were single men on their own, and the men more likely to survive were with families. You know, they had a wife and kids with them, and then they survived the trek across the states. Yeah.
Yeah, this poor guy now is because he felt like he needed to man up.
Mm. Oh no, the guy I was thinking of was also similarly young. I think he was in his 40s.
Oh,
He was a designated survivor and some other stuff. Can't remember his name. And can't even remember what cancer he had. I think I was reading it about 2 a.m, so I can't really remember much. I was trying to find out like more about the cancer and like why he died from something that only 4% of people die from. But it was all the articles were really vague on it and didn't go into any details.
probably the same reason. He probably ignored all of his symptoms.
Yeah, so bad.
Which, I mean, is it feels like such a man thing to do. Like my husband and I will have the exact same symptoms and he'll be like, no, I don't have to go to the doctor. But then he'll be encouraging me to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
And it's the big question is how do you get men and women? Because like you said, there are a lot of women who ignore their own treatments. I think people after bad news doesn't get better with time. So it's
just gets worse.
It does. And then I guess it's easy for me to say because I don't have to pay for every doctor's appointment that I go to. If I did, I would probably have a very different story. But if there's shit that doesn't feel right, you got to go get it checked out.
Yeah.
And the preventative care.
This is the problem with the American system. I mean, they say it's privatized, but it isn't. It's the medical insurance companies are able to gouge people and the pharmaceutical companies could charge whatever they want. It's a very poorly regulated industry where they can do whatever the fuck they want because they got the politicians in their pockets. So it's not really privatized. And it's like the worst kind of nationalized healthcare because you have to have the insurance and all these other things. And then the insurance, you have to be really careful about which one you get, because if you develop certain conditions, you won't be covered. Or if you've got pre-existing conditions of a certain type, you have to go with this company instead of that company. And then sometimes by the time you get there, you develop the problem, they don't support it anymore. And then it turns out you should have got a different one a month before.
And they have, I don't know if they have this in the US, but in Canada, they have a lot of commercials for get this life insurance. You don't have to do a medical up front. So people are like, oh, great. I've got these pre-existing conditions. I don't have to worry about it. But they're still not going to just blandly pay out. After you die is when they're going to be like, oh, you already had this at the time, so we're not paying. Like they get people by thinking they're never going to have to succumb to any medical intervention, but they just get you at the end instead of at the beginning.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I think I've said on here before, but my partner had a parotid tumor before. So like your parotid gland is just about here, right? And then so the operation to do it, they have to basically cut down your neck, peel your face off, get inside and cut the tumor out. Yeah. And then so there's a lot of stuff they have to be careful with because of all your facial nerves and stuff. And then if they nick a nerve, and then your face will be paralyzed. And depending on where they've got the pipes and stuff, like you could end up with like a really sort of droopy face. For the people on audio, I'm pulling my face.
Making a droopy face.
Yeah. But my partner was so fucking lucky, and we were lucky that that we live in the NHS. So, you know, our health insurance is basically the national insurance system. So we lose a small bit of our pay packets every single month. And then like think about, if any Americans listen to this, think about how much your medical insurance costs. Ours would be about £25 to £50 a month. And then that covers everything, anything that happens to you. Anyway, and then so she was able to go through all her tests, she got it all diagnosed and everything. And then within a couple of months, she was in having the operation and they took the tumor out. And she was quite lucky because it was bigger than they thought. Oh no, it wasn't as big as they thought, because like it had wrapped around her jaw. And so it looked like it was a really big mass, but it wasn't. But they still had to kind of like unwrap it around the nerve to make sure they didn't sever the nerve. And all she got at the end was just like her earlobe was a bit numb, and then she was a bit numb down here. And then like her mouth felt a bit weird for a while, but that mostly healed. But her earlobe is still a bit weird. But
really?
Yeah. But then in the state, which is quite funny watching her try and put her earrings in. She's quite good at it now. But in the States, though, because their health insurance system's so bad, so my partner got like 6 months all the way and it was all sorted. There are people in the States with parotid gland tumors that have them for years because they can't afford to get it done.
That's
And then
horrifying.
they end up with like these giant lumps on the side of their face. Honestly, if you guys, people listening to this, just Google it and it shows you like how bad the American health system is. Look at parotid gland tumors. And because they get so big before they're able to operate on them, or they find somebody that can do it, or they get the money somehow, then half of them end up with facial paralysis because the tumors got so big.
That's horrifying. And I hear a lot of people in Canada complain about our system, and it's flawed, but it's a flawed system, but we've never had to risk bankruptcy to get something treated. Like going to the doctor it's part of, which is probably why it takes forever to get to the doctor, because people aren't afraid to go to the doctors. Like I remember we had to take my dad to the emergency room. We called the ambulance, get there, and the emergency room is full of people who are there for things that they could go to their family doctors about the next day. So like people are a little too free and easy with what they go to emergency rooms for here. But there's also a lot of wait times, which is one of our big problems.
So,
but I mean, it depends, right? Like, it's not like when my dad had his brain tumor, they made him wait for surgery. It was, we need to get this out within the next 2 weeks. And within the next 2 weeks, it was out. So they just triage in a different way. But what I've heard about the Canadian system is because doctors get paid by visit, some doctors, if you go in there with 3 issues, they're like, you need to make an appointment to talk about 2 appointments to talk about the other 2, because that's how they get paid instead of just addressing it all at once. I've never experienced that. Like I've gone into doctors and I was like, I've got this and this and this and this, and they, okay, let's tackle all of it.
In the UK, it's because they don't get long enough per patient. So your GP or your primary care physician, you'd call them in the States, they get 10 minutes with you. And then, so you usually only have time to see them about the one thing. And then, so if it's complicated, then you'll have to come in for another visit for the other things.
That's awful. I mean, I guess that's why as soon as you make an appointment with your doctor, they're already running 3 hours behind schedule. But I mean, take the time that you need with your patients.
Yeah.
Because that's their life. Like that's, it could be nothing, but it could be something very serious.
Yeah, our NHS is struggling at the moment, I think. The government's just been neglecting it for 13 years, and it's almost a breaking point. But the problems that we have with the NHS, I think, is that there's a lot that people don't understand about it. Again, it's something they could teach at school. They could help people understand what the NHS is about. And like you say, there are a lot of people that use the ER instead, or A&E we call it here, instead of going to see the GP. But that's because what happened is that we had a mandate that a hospital has to keep a certain percentage of their ER visits below 4 hours before you're seen. And then because they brought that in, it meant that people, instead of going to see their GP, I just go to A&E, it'll be quicker than having to try and get a GP appointment.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense that there are times where my mom has had to go for a specialist appointment. And her doctor will refer her for this appointment, and the appointment is like 14 months away. Yeah. It's like, oh well, a lot can happen in 14 months,
especially if you're old.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
Like my dad before, so he had his brain tumor removed, and then they found a pulmonary embolism. I don't know how they found it, but they found a pulmonary embolism, and he was going to do a test. They were going to test him or scan him or do whatever to see if it was just kind of a one-off or if it was hereditary. And so my brother and sister and I were like waiting with bated breath to find out if it was hereditary. But his appointment was like 5 months in the future, and his cancer came back. So he passed before they had an opportunity to do the test. And I were like, what? Like you knew, you knew he was going to get, like, cancer was going to come back. Do the test faster.
What, can't they test it like in his autopsy or something?
They didn't do an autopsy because they knew exactly what killed him.
Oh, that's annoying.
So now we'll never know.
Well, you will at some point.
Yeah. Hopefully not when it's too late.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. You can wait. You'll find out on your deathbed. Oh, well, it wasn't that.
Hopefully that's many, many years in the future.
We had, have you heard of Spike Milligan?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's like one of our, I guess, comedian personalities years ago, and like actor and stuff. Anyway, guess what his epitaph says? It says, "I told you I was sick."
See, some people never believe you. Some people never go get tested. My brother and sister are very much like that. I think they wait, and my dad was the same. So my dad, my brother and sister don't go to the doctor's office as they should. My mom and I are both like, "Oh, this bruise is new. I should make an appointment to the doctor."
Yeah.
But my dad had cataracts, and before his cataract surgery, they had to do, I don't know if it's an ECG or an EKG or an EEG, whatever. They had to check his heart to make sure, because he was, I think at the time he was in his late 60s, early 70s. So they had to check his heart to make sure it was strong enough to undergo the cataract surgery. And then they found that all of his arteries were between 96 and 98% blocked. So he had to get, And they were asking him, haven't you experienced these symptoms? And he was like, yeah. But what got him into the doctor was that he couldn't see very well when he was driving. And he wanted to see when he was driving. Forget the whole, my heart's about to explode. I just want to be able to see when I'm driving.
Holy shit, man.
Yeah, he ignored it for years. And then he had stents put in. The stents failed. He had a pacemaker put in, all because he wanted to drive at night.
My stepdad's mum, she had a heart attack, and I think it lasted like all weekend or something. And so she was in pain, significant pain, but she didn't tell anybody. Like, family were going around and visiting her and stuff, and she was just hiding it.
But the symptoms of women's heart attacks are very different than men's heart attacks, so it's easy to ignore, because part of it is like back pain. But if your back is always hurting, you're just like, oh, I guess I twinged my back. You don't immediately think, oh, I'm having a heart attack.
Well, when she was in the hospital, like, my step auntie, I guess, her daughter, was like, "Mum, are you in pain?" And then she was like, "No, I'm fine." She's like, "I'm looking at your heart monitor. I can see what you're feeling." She's like, "Why don't you tell someone?" And she's like, "What's the point?"
What's the point? I think a lot of older generation moms are kind of like that, because they had to be tough to take care of the family. So my pain is irrelevant. Like, I have to take care of the kids.
Yeah,
I have a coworker who had a stroke last year. It was a mild stroke. She had it in her sleep. She only realized it because she went to work and she was like writing something, and she was like, "That's not my handwriting." And she kept forgetting words and she was slurring. So she's like, "I need to get this checked out."
Whoa.
So she had this stroke while she was asleep. She was off work for a couple months, recovering, getting her language back, and she had to kind of relearn all these words, and she still struggles. But when they did some tests on her, they were like, "Oh, this is not your first rodeo." Like, they discovered that while she slept, she'd had a couple of these tiny little strokes that she didn't even know about, which is horrifying. It makes me never want to sleep again. She didn't even know about them until like the next morning. She's like, I'm kind of, she's like staggering a little when she walks. She's like trying to talk and she can't get the words out. I know, it's so scary.
One of my mum's mates had something where she'd like, her knee would stop working and she'd just fall over, like wherever she was. Like, she would just fall over. And then we were walking down the street once, like we only ever see her like once a year. And walking down the street with her, and she just fell over, her face planted. And then my mum was like, "What's wrong?" And she was like, "Oh, it just does it sometimes." What do you mean it just does it sometimes?
I would constantly be covered in like protective material. I'd be walking around like a football player in protective material. I don't want to face plant and hit my Jesus. The things people get accustomed to, eh? Like you're like, "Oh yeah, this is just part of my life." Occasionally my knee stops working and I fall over, and
I'll have a stroke while I'm asleep.
That's a totally normal thing.
Yeah. No, I can understand when it's like a small thing that's gradually gotten worse over years. I get that. But when it's like something big and sudden, like, "Oh, I can't write properly anymore and I forget words."
Yeah, and she was like, she was so sad. She's like, "I had such lovely penmanship, and now I." But it's a scary thing what could happen without you even knowing it. Like, she was having strokes and not knowing. My dad ignored these, and it wasn't, my dad's symptoms weren't, it would be easy to ignore. Like, it was just kind of like, oh, you're fluttering heart or whatever, racing. And he's like, yeah, it happens every once in a while, but then it would stop. Like, it was easy for him to ignore. And he didn't go to the doctor for all the years that he was feeling it because he didn't want his doctor to tell him he had to stop drinking and smoking.
Yeah.
Even though they've been telling him that for years and he ignored them for years.
Yeah. How old was he when you passed?
Hang on, calculating. I don't think he'd hit 80. I think he was 79.
Well, that's a pretty good run, though. Like, anything past like 65 for a bloke is good.
Yeah, I think he was 79. I think, yeah. That sounds about right. 78 or 79. I can't exactly remember, but he was in his late 70s.
Yeah. Especially with his lifestyle. So
yeah, he was a heavy drinker, heavy smoker. After, I forget what got him to stop smoking. I think it was the pacemaker. And that's when he finally stopped smoking. But he kept drinking, but he would not drink as much. But after his doctor was like, you can have a glass of wine on special occasions. My dad went to the dollar store and bought like 4 different sizes of wine glasses and took them to his doctor. I was like, which one can I have?
yeah.
And the doctor was like, you can have half of this smallest cup right here. And my dad was just dejected. He was so sad.
No. My stepdad, he had a family member who just didn't look after himself at all. Like, he wasn't big on drinking or smoking or anything. He just was really unfit and he had diabetes and everything. And then his dumb thing, right? So I could imagine, like, if you've been drinking your whole life, it's quite hard to stop drinking when you get a pacemaker, and you would literally be dejected. So I get that. But this guy, fucking hell, his problem was that he liked to sit on his foot while he was playing poker on his PC. Yeah. So, like, you know, when you sit and then some people sit with their foot underneath them. And then the doctor and stuff kept saying to him, no, you can't do that because you need to get circulation to your foot. You have diabetes and you're old.
Yeah.
Fucking lost his foot. They had to amputate it because he wouldn't stop sitting on it.
Oh my God. How? I don't understand.
How does that happen?
Flabbergasted.
Yeah. That's a good place to fade to black, I think.
I think so, fuckface.
Yeah, car scandal.